The arrow whistled past her ear as Lila Hart pressed herself against the alley wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Don't touch me!" she screamed, as powerful hands grabbed her waist, lifting her onto a horse in one fluid motion. But when she looked into the Comanche warrior's dark eyes, something unexpected flickered there. Not violence, not conquest, but a desperate urgency that made her heart pound for reasons she couldn't understand. Behind them, Ash Mesa burned orange against the twilight sky, and everything she'd believed about enemies and allies was about to shatter. My friends, I invite you to witness a tale of forbidden connection and dangerous truths. Comment below which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels tonight. The afternoon sun painted Ash Mesa in shades of gold and rust, the kind of peaceful moment that always preceded disaster in frontier towns. Lila Hart dusted flour from her apron, watching through the bakery window as tumbleweeds danced across the main street. The bread cooling on the windowsill filled the air with warmth and comfort, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped the town for weeks. "Another raid last night," Mrs. Henderson whispered to her companion as they passed the shop. "The Comanche are getting bolder." Lila's jaw tightened. She'd heard these whispers growing louder each day, seen the fear creeping into her neighbor's eyes. Judge Rooke had called 3 town meetings this week alone, each one painting a darker picture of the savage threat surrounding them. The bell above her door chimed. Thomas Brennan, the sheriff's deputy, stood in the doorway, his badge catching the light. "Afternoon, Miss Hart. Your father in—" "He passed 2 winters ago, deputy. You know that." Her voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut bread. Right. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "A young woman alone running a business. Dangerous times, Miss Hart. You ought to consider Judge Rooke's offer for the property. Fair price, and you'd be safer in town proper." "I am in town proper." She turned her back on him, arranging loaves with deliberate precision. "And I'm not selling." The deputy's boots creaked across the floorboards. "Judge is trying to protect this community. These Indian troubles." The explosion cut through his words like thunder. The windows rattled, dust cascading from the rafters. Screams erupted from the street. Lila rushed outside, Thomas close behind. Black smoke billowed from the general store 3 buildings down. Flames licked at the wooden structure, spreading with terrifying speed to the adjacent buildings. People ran in every direction, some carrying buckets, others simply fleeing. "The water tower," someone shouted. They hit the water tower. Sure enough, their primary firefighting resource was nothing but splintered wood and spreading puddles. Lila's mind raced. Without water, half the town would burn before sunset. She turned to help with the bucket brigade forming at the well when she saw him, a lone figure on horseback at the end of the street, watching. Even from a distance, she could see he wasn't one of the townspeople. His silhouette against the smoke spoke of something wild, dangerous. "Comanche!" Deputy Brennan's gun was already drawn. The figure wheeled his horse and vanished between buildings. "Get inside!" Judge Rooke's voice boomed across the chaos. The tall, silver-haired man strode through the smoke like he owned the very air. Women and children to the church, armed men form a perimeter. But Lila didn't move toward the church. Something felt wrong. The attack's timing the target. Why the water tower? Why not the arsenal or the bank? She slipped into the alley beside her bakery, intending to protect her father's hidden strongbox beneath the floorboards. The alley was narrow-shadowed, filled with the acrid smell of smoke. She'd made it halfway to the back entrance when she heard the soft thud of boots landing behind her. Her blood froze. "Don't turn around," a low voice commanded. Not the harsh growl she expected, but measured, almost careful. She spun anyway, her hand finding the knife at her belt. The Comanche warrior stood 10 feet away, and he was nothing like the monsters described in town meetings. Tall, lean-muscled, with intelligent eyes that assessed her with the same wariness she felt. War paint streaked his face, but beneath it she saw something unexpected: calculation, not bloodlust. "You need to come with me." His English carried only a slight accent. "Like hell." She raised the knife, though her hand trembled. He took a step forward. She pressed against the wall. "Don't touch me. Your town burns, your people scatter like quail. But you stand here protecting what gold papers—" His head tilted. "Or do you suspect, as I do, that this fire serves someone else's purpose?" Before she could respond, voices echoed from the street. Men's voices getting closer. The warrior's expression shifted. In one fluid motion, he crossed the distance between them. Lila slashed with her knife, but he caught her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "I'm trying to save your life," he hissed, "by kidnapping me, by removing you from the real danger." His eyes flicked toward the street. "You're Judge Rooke. He's not what you think." The voices were almost at the alley entrance. Without warning, the warrior lifted her onto his horse, which had appeared as if from shadows. She tried to scream, but his hand covered her mouth, not roughly, but with urgent necessity. "Be silent, or we both die." The horse surged forward deeper into the alley, then burst out behind the buildings. Lila caught a glimpse of armed men entering where they'd just been, not townspeople, but strangers, in military-style formation. Then they were galloping hard toward the town's edge, the burning buildings falling behind. She expected him to bind her hands, to treat her as a captive. Instead, he simply held her steady on the horse, his arm around her waist, protective rather than restraining. The contradiction made her head spin more than the smoke had. They rode hard for 20 minutes before he slowed, guiding the horse up a rocky path she'd never seen before. The elevation gave them a view of Ash Mesa, now a collection of orange glows and smoke pillars in the growing dusk. "You can scream now," he said, releasing his hold. "No one will hear." She twisted to face him, fury replacing fear. "What have you done? Those are innocent people. I've done nothing." His voice carried an edge of frustration. "My people are 30 miles south, preparing for winter. This attack, it wasn't us." "You're lying." He dismounted, then helped her down. She noted he was careful not to touch more than necessary. From his saddlebag, he pulled out something that made her breath catch: a military ammunition box, clearly marked with U.S. Army stamps. "Found near the water tower," he said. "My name is Tsaahko. I came to warn your town, but—" He gestured at the smoke. Too late. Lila's mind reeled. Nothing made sense. "Why would you warn us? We're enemies." "Are we?" He studied her face. "My mother thought the same until white soldiers came with promises of protection. She died believing in those promises." The pain in his voice was too raw to be performance. Lila felt the ground shifting beneath her, everything she'd believed starting to crack. If not the Comanche, then who? The same men who profit when my people are blamed. When your people sell cheap and run. He pulled something else from his bag, a leather journal, water-damaged but readable. This belonged to a surveyor. He mapped every property in Ash Mesa, every well, every mineral deposit. Your bakery sits on the richest silver vein in the territory. Her father's land, the land Judge Rooke so desperately wanted to buy. A branch cracked in the darkness. Tsaahko's hand went to his knife, his body shifting to shield her, an instinctive protection that surprised them both. Voices carried on the wind. Search parties. "We need to move," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Then you'll go back to men who just burned your town to frame my people, who will silence you the moment you question their story." She wanted to argue, but the logic was terrifyingly sound. Still, she stood frozen, torn between two impossibilities. "Choose quickly," Tsaahko urged. "They're using dogs." The baying of hounds made the decision for her. She nodded, and they mounted again, riding deeper into the wilderness. As they climbed higher into the hills, she asked, "Why save me specifically?" "Because you stood in that alley, ready to fight while others ran, because you questioned when others accepted, and because—" He paused. 2 weeks ago, you gave bread to an old Comanche woman at the edge of town. The others threw stones. You gave bread. She remembered. The woman had been searching for her grandson lost in a skirmish. That was you watching. That was me searching. She was my aunt. They rode in silence until they reached a sheltered grove where a small spring bubbled. The temperature had dropped and Lila shivered in her thin dress. Without a word, Tsaahko pulled a wool blanket from his pack and offered it to her. "No bonds?" she asked, wrapping the blanket around herself. "You're not my prisoner. You're a witness. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, you can choose return to your town with what you know or help me expose the truth. And if I choose to return, I'll take you to the edge of town. But know this, they'll never let you speak. Your Judge Rooke has killed for less." She wanted to deny it, but something in his certainty chilled her more than the night air. "You speak as if you know him. I know his type. They exist in every conflict, men who feed on hatred, who profit from blood. My mother died in a raid led by such men. They wore cavalry uniforms, but their orders came from no military command." He built a small fire, careful to keep it smokeless. In the flickering light, she saw the exhaustion in his features, the weight he carried. "Why trust me?" she asked. "I could be lying. I could lead them straight to you." "You could." He met her eyes. "But you won't." "How can you be sure?" "Because your anger burns for truth, not revenge. I saw it in your face when you realized the ammunition was military. You want answers, not blood." She couldn't deny it. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to fight. But stronger than fear was the need to understand. Her father had died mysteriously 2 winters ago, shortly after refusing to sell to Judge Rooke. The doctor called it heart failure, but her father had been strong as an ox. "Tell me about the journal," she said. Tsaahko handed it to her. By firelight, she read surveyor's notes that made her blood run cold. Not just mineral deposits, but water rights, railway routes, and most damning, a timeline. Properties to be acquired, dates of planned Indian raids, even notes about which families would sell easily after proper motivation. This is evidence of conspiracy. Evidence means nothing if no one lives to present it. A howl echoed through the canyon, not a wolf but a dog. They were still tracking. "We should sleep in shifts," Tsaahko suggested. "I'll take first watch." But Lila couldn't sleep. Every shadow could be a threat, every sound a pursuer. More troubling were the contradictions embodied by the man keeping watch. She'd been raised on stories of Comanche brutality, yet here was one offering protection without price, speaking of justice rather than revenge. "You're staring," he said without turning. "You're not what I expected. Nor are you. Most white women would have fainted or pleaded by now. Most Comanche warriors wouldn't discuss surveyor's notes and legal evidence." A small smile tugged at his lips. "The missionary school had some benefits before I escaped. You were at the reservation school. 3 years. Long enough to learn your language, your laws, your weaknesses." The smile faded. "Long enough to watch them try to beat the Comanche out of us." The pain in his voice made her chest tight. She'd heard of the schools, of course, but always as civilizing missions. The reality in his tone suggested something far darker. "Is that where you learned about property law?" "That's where I learned that your laws are weapons, same as guns, sometimes more effective." He finally turned to look at her. "Your people worship paper and ink. With the right papers, they'll justify any cruelty." "Not all of us." "No," he agreed. "Not all. That's why you're here instead of dead." The blunt statement should have terrified her. Instead, she felt oddly reassured. He could have killed her easily, could have taken whatever he wanted. Instead, he offered blankets and truth. "What's your plan?" she asked. "The journal alone won't stop them." "No, but there's more. Judge Rooke keeps records he's too arrogant not to. Records of payments, orders, plans. They'll be in his office." "That's suicide. His office is in the courthouse center of town guards everywhere. Unless those guards are busy elsewhere." say hunting a kidnapped white woman and her savage captor. Understanding dawned. You want to use me as bait. I want to use their assumptions against them. While they chase shadows in the hills, someone could slip into town through the old mine shafts. The mines have been sealed for years. The main entrances, yes, but there are other ways if you know where to look. He pulled out another paper, a mine map far more detailed than any she'd seen. Your father drew this. Her heart stopped. What? He sent it to us 3 months before he died. He was trying to warn both sides about Rooke's plan. Lila took the map with shaking hands. Her father's precise handwriting covered the margins. Notes about cave-ins that weren't accidents, about miners who asked too many questions and disappeared. He knew, he suspected. He was gathering evidence when his heart failed. Bitterness twisted her voice. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Lila spoke. The mine shaft that connects to the courthouse basement, it's unstable. One wrong step and the whole thing collapses. Then we'll need someone who knows the safe path. That would be me. Father took me down there once, showing me the old Spanish gold markers. Said it was our insurance if times got hard. You'd risk it. For the truth about my father, yes. Tsaahko studied her for a long moment. We'll need 3 days. 1 to let them establish search patterns, 1 to infiltrate, 1 to escape with the evidence. And then we present it to someone Rooke can't buy or threaten. There's a federal marshal in Fort Worth. A gunshot cracked through the night bark, exploding from the tree beside Lila's head. They dove for cover as more shots followed. Found them, a voice shouted. The savage has the woman. Tsaahko pulled her behind a boulder as bullets whined overhead. Can you ride? Yes. Good. When I give the signal, run for the horses. Ride north toward the canyon. What about you? He was already moving, pulling a bow from his back, creating a distraction. Go. He disappeared into the darkness. Seconds later, an arrow sprouted from a searcher's shoulder, the man's scream echoing off the rocks. More arrows followed, seeming to come from multiple directions. The gunfire grew erratic, panicked. Lila ran for the horses, untying them with fumbling fingers. She mounted just as Tsaahko materialized from the shadows, blood streaming from a graze on his arm. Ride. They plunged into the darkness, branches tearing at their clothes. Behind them, shouts and gunfire faded gradually, but they didn't slow until they reached a narrow canyon that forced them to ride single file. You're hurt, Lila called. I've had worse. But when they finally stopped, she saw him sway in the saddle. She helped him down, tearing strips from her petticoat to bind the wound. This is backward, he muttered. I'm supposed to be rescuing you. Maybe neither of us needs rescuing. Maybe we just need an ally. Their eyes met in the moonlight, something shifting between them. Not captor and captive, not white and Comanche, just 2 people fighting the same enemy. There's a place, Tsaahko said softly. A cave system my people use for ceremonies. It's hidden sacred. We could plan there, gather what we need. Your people won't welcome me. They will if I vouch for you, and when they hear about your father's sacrifice, about his attempts to warn us. He touched her hand briefly. You're not the enemy anymore. The touch sent unexpected warmth through her. She pulled away, confused by her reaction. This was insane. 24 hours ago, she'd believed the Comanche were monsters. Now she was planning to infiltrate her own town with one. What aren't you telling me? She asked. There's something else about Rooke. Tsaahko was quiet for a long moment. The raid that killed my mother, Rooke led it. He wasn't a judge then, just a lieutenant with ambitions. He made his fortune selling army supplies to both sides, then used the chaos to claim abandoned lands. How long have you been tracking him? 3 years. Every move, every scheme, every murder disguised as an accident or Indian raid. This is revenge for you. No. His voice was firm. Revenge would be an arrow in his heart one dark night. This is justice, using his own weapons, law, and evidence against him. Dawn was breaking, painting the canyon walls gold and crimson. In the light, Lila could see the exhaustion in both their faces, the weight of what they were attempting. "We should reach the caves by midday," Tsaahko said. "My cousin Cato will be on watch. Don't make sudden moves, he's quick with a bow." They rode in companionable silence, the landscape shifting from rocky canyon to high desert. Lila found herself stealing glances at Tsaahko, noting the graceful way he moved with his horse, the constant alertness, even while wounded. Everything she'd been taught said she should fear him, but instead she felt safer than she had in months. There, he pointed to what looked like a solid cliff face, the entrance. As they approached, a figure emerged from seemingly nowhere, a younger Comanche warrior with suspicious eyes and a drawn bow. "Cato," Tsaahko said in Comanche, then switched to English for Lila. "This is Miss Hart. She's under my protection." Cato's eyes widened. "You brought a white woman to the sacred caves." "I brought an ally who knows the truth about our enemies." They argued briefly in Comanche, Cato gesturing angrily. Finally, an older voice called from within the caves. A woman emerged, elderly but straight-backed, with eyes that seemed to see through everything. "Grandmother," Tsaahko said respectfully, "this is the baker woman who fed my sister." The grandmother studied Lila intently. "I know who she is. The question is, does she know who she is?" "I don't understand," Lila said. "You stand at a crossroads, child. You can be what your people expect, afraid, prejudiced, small. Or you can be what your father hoped, brave enough to see truth, strong enough to speak it. You knew my father. He came here once, alone, unarmed, seeking peace. He warned us of the false raids, tried to broker understanding, a good man in a nest of vipers." Tears burned Lila's eyes. This was the father she remembered, the one who taught her that people were people regardless of skin or custom. "Come," the grandmother said. "You need food, rest, and planning. The storm you're about to unleash will require all your strength." As they entered the cave, Lila felt the weight of history of choices that would echo far beyond Ash Mesa. Behind her, Tsaahko placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, not possessive but supportive. "No turning back now," he said softly. "I turned back the moment I chose truth over comfort," she replied. The cave opened into a vast chamber lit by clever light shafts. Other Comanche were there, some watching with curiosity, others with hostility. But when the grandmother spoke in their language, explaining who Lila was and what they planned, the mood shifted. An older warrior approached, studying them both. "If this is true, if Rooke orchestrated these raids, then the blood of both our peoples is on his hands." "It's true," Lila said firmly, "and I'll prove it, even if it costs me everything." The warrior nodded slowly. "Then you have our support, but know this, if you betray us—" "She won't," Tsaahko interrupted. "I stake my life on it." The weight of his trust settled over her like a mantle. She'd never had anyone believe in her so completely, especially someone who had every reason not to. As the day progressed, they refined their plan. The cave system was extensive, with passages leading in multiple directions. One they discovered came within 50 feet of the mine shaft Lila's father had mapped. "We'll need rope," she said, studying the map, "and lamp oil. The shaft hasn't been maintained. It'll be pitch black." "I can get those," Cato offered, his initial hostility fading. "There's a supply cache near the old trading post." "The timing has to be perfect," Tsaahko added. "They'll expect me to take you deeper into Comanche territory. We need to be seen heading south, then double back at night." "Use the ghost paint," the grandmother suggested. "They see what they expect to see." Lila looked confused, and Tsaahko explained, "War paint that makes us look like spirits in moonlight. Your people's superstitions work in our favor." "Everything depends on getting into Rooke's office unseen," Lila said. "He keeps his important documents in a safe behind the portrait of his wife." "You know the combination?" "No, but I know his arrogance. It'll be something meaningful to him, a date, a number that feeds his ego. The date of his first successful land grab, Tsaahko suggested, or his commission date, or Lila's eyes widened. The date of the massacre at Willow Creek. He brags about it when he's drunk. 37 Comanche dead, he always says, like it's a point of pride. The room went silent. Several warriors stood, hands moving to weapons. 37 was not the number, the grandmother said quietly. It was 43. 6 were children. The rage in the room was palpable, but Tsaahko raised his hand. This is why we seek justice, not revenge, so their names are remembered correctly, their stories told truly. That night, as they prepared, Lila found herself beside Tsaahko at the cave entrance, watching stars emerge. "Are you frightened?" he asked, terrified, but also alive. "For the first time since Father died, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. You could still walk away. I could take you to another town somewhere Rooke couldn't reach. Could you walk away, leave your mother's death unavenged? It's not the same, isn't it?" She turned to face him. "We both lost parents to the same evil. We both want justice. The only difference is that your loss is older." He studied her face in the starlight. "You're not what I expected when I watched you in town. What did you expect? Someone pampered soft who'd collapse at the first hardship. And now I see steel wrapped in silk, a warrior who fights with different weapons." The compliment made her pulse quicken. "Tsaahko, I know," he said quietly. "Wrong time, wrong people's wrong everything. Is it wrong to find an ally, a friend?" "Friend." He tested the word. "My people have a saying, true friendship is forged in shared danger. And then we should be excellent friends by tomorrow night." He laughed, a rich sound that surprised them both. "You have humor even facing death, another warrior trait." A commotion from the caves interrupted them. Kato had returned with supplies but also news. "They're offering a $1,000 reward," he reported. "Dead or alive for the savage, unharmed for the woman." "Only unharmed?" Lila asked. "That's suspicious." "They need you alive to sign over the property," Tsaahko realized. "Rooke's probably already drawn up papers sign or be rescued too late." "Then we definitely need those documents. Without proof, he'll just claim I was traumatized, not thinking clearly." They spent the remaining hours going over every detail. The mine shaft entry, the courthouse layout, the escape route. By the time they set out, the moon was high and full, perfect for being seen where they wanted, invisible where they needed. The first part worked flawlessly. They rode obviously south, Lila's white dress visible for miles in the moonlight. They heard pursuit forming behind them, dogs, baying horses, galloping. At the prearranged spot, they met Kato with fresh horses quickly switching while laying false trails in 3 directions. By the time they reached the concealed mine entrance, the search parties were 20 miles south, chasing shadows. "Remember," Tsaahko said as they prepared to descend, "if something goes wrong, we continue with the plan," Lila finished. "The truth matters more than either of us." He nodded, but she saw the conflict in his eyes. They'd known each other only days, yet something had formed between them. Trust, respect, and perhaps something deeper neither dared name. The mine shaft was worse than Lila remembered. Rotting timbers, unstable floors, and air that tasted of decay. They moved slowly, testing each step. Twice sections collapsed behind them, cutting off retreat. "No going back now," she whispered. "Was there ever?" They reached the connecting tunnel to the courthouse basement. Here, the construction was newer brick and mortar instead of timber. Lila recognized her father's work. He'd helped build this during the courthouse expansion. He knew, she realized. He built this knowing someday someone would need a way in. They emerged through a concealed panel into the courthouse basement. Above, they could hear footsteps, voices. The building wasn't empty, guards, even at night. "Rooke's paranoid," Tsaahko observed. "Good. paranoid men make mistakes. They crept up the service stairs, Lila leading. She knew this building had played here as a child when her father did construction work. At the second floor, they paused. Rooke's office was at the end of the hall, but a guard sat outside. "I'll handle him," Tsaahko whispered, but Lila caught his arm. "No violence unless necessary. We're better than him." Tsaahko nodded, pulling out a small pouch. Sleeping powder. The missionary school's garden had interesting plants. He moved like smoke, approaching the guard from behind. A brief struggle, then the man slumped. They dragged him into an empty office, binding him gently. Rooke's office door was locked, but Lila had expected that. She pulled pins from her hair, working the mechanism like her father had taught her. "Useful skill for a baker," Tsaahko commented. "Father said knowledge is never wasted." The lock clicked open. Inside the office was opulent, thick carpets, leather chairs, and behind the desk the portrait of Rooke's late wife. Lila went straight to it, swinging it aside to reveal the safe. "The date," she murmured, trying the Willow Creek massacre date. Nothing. His commission date. Nothing. "Hurry," Tsaahko urged from the door. "Someone's coming." Footsteps in the hall. Lila's mind raced. What would matter most to a man like Rooke? Then it hit her, not a military date, but a financial one. "The date he filed his first land claim," she whispered, spinning the dial. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of documents, gold coins, and most importantly, a leather ledger. She opened it, scanning quickly. Names, dates, payments, a complete record of bribes, false raids, and murders. "This is it. This is everything." "Take it and go," Tsaahko said urgently. But Lila was pulling out more papers. Look, correspondence with the senator, railroad executives, even army generals. This is bigger than just Ash Mesa. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle turned. "Window," Tsaahko hissed. They grabbed the documents and ledger, Tsaahko throwing the window open. It was a 20-foot drop to the alley. "Trust me," he said, then wrapped his arms around her and jumped. They hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb impact. Shouts erupted from above. They ran, clutching the evidence, as the courthouse bell began to toll an alarm that would wake the entire town. "The horses," Lila gasped. "Too far. We need another way." She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the church. Father built a hidden cellar there, too, connected to the old Spanish mission ruins. They burst into the church just as lanterns began lighting windows throughout town. Lila led them behind the altar, pressing a seemingly solid stone. It swung inward, revealing steep stairs. "Your father was a man of many secrets," Tsaahko said as they descended. "He was preparing for something like this. He knew eventually someone would need to fight Rooke." The tunnel was narrow but stable. They followed it for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes, emerging in the ruins outside town. Kato was waiting with horses as planned. "They're mobilizing everything," he reported. "Cavalry from the fort, every able-bodied man in town." "Good," Tsaahko said. "Let them chase us. We have what we need." But as they mounted, Lila looked back at Ash Mesa. "Some of those people are innocent. They don't know what Rooke has done." "They'll know soon enough." They rode hard through the night, not toward Comanche territory, but east toward Fort Worth, and the federal marshal Tsaahko trusted. As dawn broke, they stopped to rest the horses at a hidden spring. "We did it," Lila said, almost disbelieving. "The dangerous part is just beginning. Rooke will know we have the evidence. He'll do anything to stop us reaching the marshal. Then we'd better be ready." As she said it, she realized how much had changed. Days ago, she'd been a simple baker. Her biggest worry was flour supplies. Now she was a fugitive allied with a Comanche warrior carrying evidence that could reshape the entire territory. "What happens after?" she asked. "When the truth comes out, justice, hopefully. Rooke hangs for his crimes. The false raids stop. Maybe even some peace between our peoples. And us?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither dared voice. "We survive first," Tsaahko said finally. Then we see what world we've created." But as they prepared to ride again, dust clouds appeared on the three horizons. They were being surrounded. The real fight for truth was about to begin, and Lila realized that her journey from that burning bakery had only been the first step. The hardest battles lay ahead, but she was no longer the frightened woman screaming, "Don't touch me," in an alley. She was a warrior in her own right, fighting for justice with an unexpected ally who'd shown her that enemy and friend were matters of perspective and choice. The morning sun painted the landscape gold, and somewhere in the distance she heard the cry of an eagle. A sign Tsaahko said of change coming. She touched the ledger in her saddlebag, her father's map, the truth that would shake foundations. Then she looked at the man beside her, this Comanche warrior who'd saved her not with force, but with truth, and felt something her father would have understood, that sometimes the most powerful revolutions began with two people choosing to see past the lies that divided them. "Ready?" Tsaahko asked. "Ready," she replied, and they rode toward their destiny, toward justice, toward a future neither could fully imagine, but both were willing to fight for. The dust clouds converged like a noose, tightening around them. Tsaahko counted at least 3 separate groups, maybe 40 riders total. Too many to fight, too close to outrun. Lila's knuckles whitened as she gripped her reins, the leather saddlebag containing the evidence pressing against her leg like a burning brand. The canyon, Kato pointed to a narrow split in the rocks, barely visible from their position. "It's our only chance." They spurred their horses, hard hooves thundering across the hard-packed earth. Behind them, shouts erupted as the pursuers spotted their movement. Gunfire cracked through the morning air, bullets whining past like angry hornets. Lila bent low over her horse's neck, her father's voice echoing in her memory, teaching her to ride, to become one with the animal. The canyon entrance rushed toward them, barely wide enough for a single horse. Tsaahko gestured for her to go first. She plunged into the shadowed passage stone walls, scraping her legs, her horse's breath echoing off the narrow confines. Behind her, she heard Tsaahko and Kato following, then the frustrated shouts of their pursuers, realizing they'd have to enter single file. "Keep going," Tsaahko called. "Don't stop." The canyon twisted and turned, sometimes opening into wider sections where ancient water had carved bowl-shaped chambers, other times narrowing so much she had to kick her feet free of the stirrups. Her heart hammered against her ribs. If they hit a dead end, they were finished. A shot rang out impossibly loud in the confined space. Rock chips exploded near her head. Someone had entered the canyon behind them. She urged her horse faster, trusting the animal's instincts in the dim light. Then suddenly blessed daylight ahead, the canyon opening into a wider valley. She burst out into the open, immediately wheeling her horse to the side. Tsaahko emerged seconds later, then Kato, blood streaming from a graze on his shoulder. "They're right behind us," Kato gasped. Tsaahko scanned the valley with the quick assessment of a warrior. "The old ruins. We can defend there." Across the valley stood the remnants of an ancient Spanish mission, its adobe walls crumbling but still substantial. They raced toward it as the first pursuer emerged from the canyon. More gunfire erupted, but the distance was too great for accuracy. They reached the ruins just as a dozen riders poured from the canyon. Lila slid from her horse, grabbing the saddlebag with the evidence. The mission's walls provided cover, but they were surrounded on 3 sides with only the steep cliff face behind them. "We're trapped," she said. "No," Tsaahko pointed to barely visible handholds carved into the cliff. "The old ones always built escape routes. Can you climb?" Before she could answer, a familiar voice boomed across the valley. "Miss Hart, I know you're confused, traumatized by your ordeal. Come out and no harm will come to you." Judge Rooke himself riding at the head of another group that had circled around. Lila felt rage burn through her fear. "Traumatized," she shouted back. "The only trauma I've suffered is learning how many murders you've committed." Silence greeted her words. Then Rooke's laugh, cold and dismissive. See, gentlemen, the poor girl's been corrupted by the savage. She doesn't know what she's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Lila pulled out the ledger, holding it high. I have your records, Rooke. Every bribe, every false raid, every innocent person killed for your greed. The men with Rooke shifted uneasily. Not all of them were in on the conspiracy, she realized. Some were just townspeople who believed they were rescuing her. Thomas, she called to Deputy Brennan, who she spotted among them. Did you know he killed my father? That he's been orchestrating attacks on both sides? Don't listen to her, Rooke snapped. The savage has poisoned her mind. Then why are you so desperate to silence me? She pulled out a letter, reading loud enough for all to hear. October 15th, payment of $500 to Jackson Mills for elimination of Henry Hart, staged as natural causes. Several men lowered their guns, confusion replacing certainty. Rooke's face darkened with fury. Take them, he commanded, dead or alive. But only half the men moved forward. The others hesitated, doubt creeping into their faces. That moment of hesitation was all Tsaahko needed. He pulled Lila toward the cliff face, Kato covering them with his bow. Arrows flew with deadly precision, not killing but wounding, causing chaos in the ranks. Climb, Tsaahko urged, boosting her up to the first handhold. Lila had never been afraid of heights, but climbing a sheer cliff with bullets striking around her was different. She forced herself to focus on each handhold, each footstep. Below, she heard Tsaahko, following his presence, oddly reassuring. Halfway up, her foot slipped. For a terrifying moment, she dangled by her fingertips, the ground spinning below. Then Tsaahko's hand steadied her, guiding her foot to a ledge. I've got you, he said quietly. Trust me. She did, she realized, completely. They reached a narrow ledge that led along the cliff face. Kato was already there, having climbed with remarkable speed despite his wound. Below, Rooke's men were attempting to follow, but the climb required skill most didn't possess. This way, Kato led them along the ledge to where it widened into a cave mouth. Inside, the cave opened into a vast chamber, sunlight filtering through cracks above. Ancient paintings covered the walls, telling stories older than any of their conflicts. We can't stay here, Lila said. They'll find another way up. We won't need to. Tsaahko moved to the far wall where more paintings depicted what looked like a river. He pressed against some certain symbols, and incredibly a section of wall swung inward. The old ones built networks through these mountains. Rooke's men won't know these passages exist. They plunged into darkness, following a tunnel that sloped downward. Tsaahko lit a torch he'd pulled from his pack, the flames casting dancing shadows. The air grew cooler, and soon Lila heard the sound of running water. The tunnel opened into an underground river chamber, a natural cathedral of stone with water flowing through its center. A small raft was moored at the edge, ancient but maintained. My people have used this route for generations, Tsaahko explained. It emerges 15 miles downstream, well past any blockade Rooke could set. As they boarded the raft, Lila clutched the evidence bag tighter. He'll know where we're headed. He'll try to intercept us before we reach Fort Worth. Let him try, Kato said, though his face was pale from blood loss. We have truth on our side. The underground river was like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Strange formations loomed out of the darkness, the water sometimes calm, sometimes rapids, that threatened to dash them against stone walls. Lila found herself pressed against Tsaahko for stability, his arm around her waist, purely practical, but sending unexpected warmth through her. After what felt like hours, they emerged into daylight, the river flowing into a hidden valley she'd never known existed. Here, surprisingly, horses waited, along with 3 more Comanche warriors. Grandmother sent us, one explained. She saw in a dream that you would need us. Fresh horses, fresh allies, but also fresh news. Rooke has sent riders to every town between here and Fort Worth, the warrior reported. He's claiming the Comanche kidnapped you and forged documents to frame him. There's now $5,000 on Tsaahko's head. 5,000. Lila was stunned. That's more than most people see in a lifetime. He's desperate, Tsaahko said grimly, which makes him more dangerous. They rode through the night again, taking paths known only to the Comanche, avoiding main roads and settlements. At dawn, they stopped at a small trading post run by a Mexican family that Tsaahko trusted. The owner, Miguel, greeted them warily until he recognized Tsaahko. "Amigo, you bring trouble to my door." "I bring truth that needs to reach Fort Worth," Tsaahko replied, "and we need supplies." Miguel's wife Rosa took one look at Lila's torn dress and exhausted face and immediately ushered her inside. "Come, child, you need food and rest." While the men planned, Rosa helped Lila clean up and provided her with practical traveling clothes, Mexican-style riding skirts and blouse that would attract less attention than her torn American dress. "You ride with the Comanche by choice?" Rosa asked carefully. "I ride with justice," Lila replied. "The man they call Savage is more honorable than the judge who rules my town." Rosa nodded slowly. "We know this Judge Rooke. He came here once wanting to buy our land. When we refused, bandits attacked the next week. We barely survived. He's destroyed so many lives," Lila said. "But we have evidence now. We can stop him." "If you live long enough to present it," Rosa said pragmatically. "The road to Fort Worth is long, and Rooke has many friends." When they gathered to leave, Miguel pulled Tsaahko aside. "There's something you should know. A cavalry unit passed through yesterday heading to Fort Worth. They had orders to shoot any Comanche on sight, no questions asked." "Then I can't enter the city," Tsaahko said. "They'll kill me before I can speak." "We'll find another way," Lila insisted. "I could go alone." "No." Tsaahko's response was immediate. "Rooke's men will be watching for you. Alone, you're vulnerable." "Then we're stuck." "Not necessarily," Miguel said thoughtfully. "There's a newspaper man in Fort Worth, Samuel Morrison. He's been investigating corruption in the territory for years. If you could get the evidence to him first, published in the paper, then the marshal would have to act." It was a good plan, but it meant reaching Morrison without being caught. They set out again, this time with Miguel's son Jorge as guide. He knew smuggling routes that avoided main roads, paths used to move goods away from government taxes. 2 days passed in tense travel. They slept in hidden camps, ate cold food, to avoid making fires that might draw attention. On the third morning, as they neared Fort Worth, disaster struck. Jorge had gone ahead to scout when they heard his whistle, the signal for danger, but it was too late. Soldiers emerged from concealment, surrounding them with rifles raised. "Nobody move." The sergeant in charge kept his gun trained on Tsaahko. "We've been expecting you, Savage." "Wait." Lila moved her horse forward. "I'm Lila Hart. This man saved my life. He's not—" "Step aside, miss. We have orders to bring you safely to Judge Rooke, who's waiting in Fort Worth." "Rooke is here." Her heart sank. "Arrived yesterday. He's very concerned about your welfare." The sergeant's tone suggested he believed this completely. "Sergeant, please listen. Judge Rooke is the criminal here. I have evidence." "Evidence can be presented through proper channels, miss. Now step aside or we'll move you aside." She saw it in their faces, the closed-off look of men following orders without thinking. They'd already decided Tsaahko was guilty, her a victim. Nothing she said would change that. Tsaahko caught her eye, a slight nod, telling her he understood what had to happen. "Go with them," he said quietly. "Get to Morrison. Tell the truth." "No, I won't let them." Gunfire erupted, but not from the soldiers. Kato and the other Comanche warriors attacked from cover arrows and bullets, creating chaos. In the confusion, Tsaahko grabbed the evidence bag from Lila's saddle. "Go!" he shouted, slapping her horse's rump. The animal bolted toward Fort Worth. She wanted to turn back, but she understood. Someone had to reach Morrison, and she had the best chance. Behind her, the battle raged. She didn't know if Tsaahko would survive, if any of them would. All she could do was complete the mission. Fort Worth rose before her, a proper city compared to Ash Mesa. She knew Rooke would have men watching for her, so she avoided the main streets, cutting through alleys and back ways. The newspaper office was on 3rd Street, a narrow building squeezed between a saloon and a general store. She burst through the door, startling a young man at a desk. "I need to see Samuel Morrison. Now, he's not—" the young man began, but she was already pushing past him to the back office. Morrison was a thin, intense man with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes. He looked up from his writing, immediately alert. "Miss Hart, I presume the whole town's talking about your kidnapping." "I wasn't kidnapped, I was saved, and I have proof of Judge Rooke's crimes." She realized with sinking heart that Tsaahko had the evidence bag, but then she remembered she'd kept some documents in her pockets. She pulled them out, crumpled but legible. "This is part of it. The rest—" Heavy footsteps on the stairs interrupted her. The door burst open and Judge Rooke himself entered, flanked by 2 large men. "Miss Hart," he said smoothly, "thank God we found you. You've clearly been through an ordeal." "The only ordeal has been discovering what a monster you are," she spat. Morrison stood slowly. "Judge Rooke, this is a private business, and this is a matter of public safety." Rooke cut him off. "This poor woman has been corrupted by savages, fed lies and fabrications. She needs medical attention. I need justice." Lila held up the documents. "Mr. Morrison, please read these. They prove everything." Morrison reached for them, but one of Rooke's men stepped between them. "Those are forged documents created by the Comanche to discredit honest citizens," Rooke said. "I'll need to take them as evidence." "Evidence of what?" Morrison asked sharply. "If they're forgeries, surely they can be easily disproven." Rooke's face hardened. "Are you suggesting you'd publish the ravings of a traumatized woman and the lies of savages?" "I'm suggesting that a free press has the right to investigate all claims," Morrison replied, "especially when they involve such serious accusations." The tension in the room was electric. Then from outside came the sound of many horses. Through the window, Lila saw an astonishing sight. Tsaahko, bloodied but alive, riding at the head of a mixed group of Comanche warriors, Mexican traders, and most surprisingly, several white townspeople from Ash Mesa. "What is this?" Rooke moved to the window. "The truth arriving," Lila said. The crowd gathered in the street below. She recognized faces: Mrs. Henderson, whose husband had died in a raid after refusing to sell their farm; Tom Martinez, whose brother had been framed for cattle theft; others who'd suffered under Rooke's schemes but had been too afraid to speak. Tsaahko dismounted, the evidence bag in his hands. Soldiers moved to stop him, but the crowd pressed forward, protecting him. "Let him speak," someone shouted. "We want to hear." Morrison grabbed his notebook. "Judge, if you have nothing to hide, surely you won't object to a public airing of these documents." Rooke's hand moved to his gun. "This is an illegal assembly. Disperse immediately." "On whose authority?" A new voice, strong and commanding. Federal Marshal James Crawford pushed through the crowd, his badge gleaming. "I received some interesting telegrams about you, Judge Rooke. Seems you've been a very busy man." "This is my jurisdiction." "Not anymore." Crawford produced a document. "Federal warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy murder and inciting violence between settlers and native tribes." Rooke went for his gun, but Tsaahko was faster. Not with violence, but with truth. He opened the evidence bag, pulling out the ledger, holding it high for all to see. "Every crime is documented here," he called out. "In Judge Rooke's own hand." The crowd surged forward, wanting to see. Morrison was already writing frantically. Rooke's men backed away, not willing to fire on so many citizens. "Lies," Rooke shouted. "Fabrications. Then you won't mind if we compare the handwriting to official documents," Marshal Crawford suggested. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward. "My husband died after refusing to sell our water rights. The doctor said heart failure, but he was healthy as an ox." My brother was hanged for rustling cattle he never stole, Martinez added. The real thieves were men Rooke hired. More voices rose, each with a story, a loss, a suspicion confirmed. The evidence wasn't just in the documents, it was in the living testimony of those who'd suffered. Rooke tried to run, but the crowd wouldn't let him pass. Not with violence, but simply by standing firm, forcing him back toward the marshal. It's over, Rooke, Crawford said, producing shackles. You're going to face trial for every death, every false raid, every family destroyed. As the marshal led Rooke away, Lila felt her knees buckle. The tension that had kept her going for days suddenly released. Strong arms caught her Tsaahko, despite his own injuries. We did it, she whispered. You did it, he corrected. You had the courage to seek truth when everyone else accepted lies. Morrison approached them, notebook still in hand. This story will be on every newspaper in the territory by week's end. The whole truth about the false raids, the conspiracy, and about the Comanche warrior and frontier woman who risked everything to expose it. Just tell the truth, Lila said. That's all we wanted. The crowd was dispersing slowly, but many stopped to shake Tsaahko's hand, to nod respectfully. The change wasn't complete. Years of prejudice wouldn't disappear overnight, but it was a beginning. What now? Morrison asked. What happens to Ash Mesa? We rebuild, Lila said firmly. Without fear, without lies dividing us. And you? Morrison looked at Tsaahko. Your people, we want peace, Tsaahko replied. Real peace, not the false treaty Rooke would have forced. Perhaps now, with truth spoken, we can find it. As the sun set over Fort Worth, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lila stood beside Tsaahko, looking out at a future neither had imagined possible just days before. The evidence was safe, the truth revealed, but she knew this was just the beginning. Your father would be proud, Tsaahko said quietly. He always believed in building bridges, not walls, she replied. He'd be proud of both of us. Rosa from the trading post approached with medical supplies. Let me see those wounds, she insisted, fussing over both of them. Heroes or not, infection doesn't care about your noble deeds. As Rosa tended to them, Kato arrived with news. The garrison commander wants to speak with you. He's offering safe passage for our people to attend the trial, to testify. They're actually going to listen to Comanche testimony. Lila was amazed. The marshal insists on it, Kato replied. He says justice requires all voices be heard. That night they stayed at a boarding house. Morrison arranged the proprietor, surprisingly willing to accommodate both Lila and the Comanche warriors. It was strange sitting at a civilized dinner table after days of running and fighting, but also hopeful. This changes everything, Morrison said over dinner. If Rooke's network is as extensive as these documents suggest, we're looking at corruption throughout the territory. This could lead to real reform. Or to powerful men protecting themselves, Tsaahko said realistically. Rooke has friends in high places. Then we make sure the story spreads faster than they can suppress it, Morrison replied. I've already sent telegrams to newspapers in Denver, San Francisco, even New York. This isn't just local news anymore. A commotion outside interrupted them. Through the window they saw a group of well-dressed men approaching, led by someone Lila recognized with sinking heart, Senator William Carr, whose name appeared in Rooke's ledger. They're here to destroy the evidence, she realized. Over my dead body, Morrison said, but Tsaahko put a hand on his shoulder. No more death, we've spilled enough blood. He looked at Lila. But perhaps it's time for more truth. She understood immediately. As Carr and his men entered the boarding house, she stood holding up another document from the collection. Senator Carr, she said loudly, ensuring other diners heard. How interesting that you're here. I was just reading about your investments in the Ash Mesa Land Company, the one that would have profited so handsomely from driving out both settlers and Comanche. Carr's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Then you won't mind if Mr. Morrison publishes these correspondence between you and Judge Rooke, the ones discussing payment schedules and territorial divisions. The senator looked around the room, seeing all eyes on him. Morrison already writing. "This is blackmail. This is transparency," Marshal Crawford said from the doorway he'd been watching, waiting. "Senator, I suggest you leave, unless you'd like to join Judge Rooke in custody." Carr retreated, but his parting look promised this wasn't over. There would be a trial, Lila knew, and powerful forces would align against them, but for tonight, they'd won. As the evening wore on, unexpected allies emerged. A local minister offered his church for a peace gathering between settlers and Comanche. A banker disgusted by Rooke's crimes offered to help families reclaim stolen lands. The truth, once released, was spreading like wildfire. "You realize what you've started?" Crawford asked Lila privately. "This could reshape the entire territory's future." "It needed reshaping," she replied. "We can't build anything lasting on a foundation of lies." The marshal studied her thoughtfully. "You're going to testify at the trial. Even knowing Rooke's associates will try to discredit you, maybe even harm you. Someone has to stand for the victims who can't speak anymore. My father, Tsaahko's mother, all the others." "And him," Crawford nodded toward Tsaahko. "A Comanche warrior's testimony in a white court. It'll be controversial." "The truth often is," Lila said, "but that doesn't make it less true." Later, as the boarding house quieted for the night, Lila found herself on the porch with Tsaahko, looking at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed their desperate flight now watched over a moment of peace. "When this is over," Tsaahko began, then stopped. "Yes, your world and mine, they're still very different. Even with Rooke gone, the challenges—" "I know," she said softly, "but maybe that's exactly why we need to try, to show it's possible." "Is that what we're doing, trying?" She turned to face him fully. "We've trusted each other with our lives. We've fought for truth together. That has to count for something." "In my culture," he said carefully, "such bonds are sacred, not easily broken." "In mine too," she replied, "though I suspect we're about to test just how sacred people consider them." Before he could respond, Kato appeared. Riders approaching, many of them. They tensed, ready for another fight, but the riders carried torches and white flags. As they got closer, Lila gasped. It was a delegation from Ash Mesa, led by, surprisingly, Mrs. Henderson and Tom Martinez. "We've come to testify," Mrs. Henderson announced. "All of us. We've been silent too long, letting fear control us. It's time for truth." "Even if it means standing with the Comanche?" Tsaahko asked. Martinez stepped forward. "My family came from Mexico. We know what it's like to be called savage, to have our lands taken. If you're willing to stand for justice, we stand with you." It was unprecedented. Settlers and Comanche Mexicans and Anglos, all united by a common cause. Rooke had meant to divide them, but his crimes had ultimately brought them together. Morrison was beside himself with excitement. This is the story of the century, the trial that could change everything. But Lila noticed Tsaahko's expression remained guarded. "What is it?" "Change doesn't come easily," he said. "There will be those who resist, who prefer the old hatreds to new understanding." As if to prove his point, a shot rang out. A window shattered. Everyone dove for cover as more shots followed. In the chaos, Lila saw masked riders fleeing into the night. "A warning," Crawford said grimly. "They want us to back down." "And then they don't know us very well," Lila replied, helping board up the broken window. "We've come too far to stop now." The next days passed in a blur of preparation. Morrison's articles were creating sensation across the territory. Letters of support poured in, but so did threats. The trial date was set, and Fort Worth began filling with people wanting to witness history. Tsaahko's grandmother arrived with a delegation of Comanche elders, their presence causing whispers and stares. But she walked through town with dignity, stopping at the boarding house where Lila waited. "You've started something that cannot be stopped," the old woman said, "like water breaking through a dam. But be careful, such floods can destroy as well as cleanse." We're trying to build, not destroy, Lila assured her. I know, child. That's why I brought this. She produced a beautifully woven blanket, its patterns telling a story. This shows the history of our peoples, the conflicts, yes, but also the times of trade, of mutual respect. Present this at the trial. Let them see we are not just warriors or victims, but people with long memory and hope for peace. The gesture moved Lila to tears. Thank you. I'll make sure they see it, understand it. And you, the grandmother turned to Tsaahko. You know what choosing this path means. Walking between worlds is never easy. Neither is walking alone in just one world, he replied, his eyes finding Lila's. The old woman smiled. Then perhaps you are wiser than I thought. The night before the trial, Lila couldn't sleep. She walked through Fort Worth's streets, seeing the divisions and connections. Comanche camps on one side, settler wagons on another, but also places where they mingled, shared food, told stories. The beginning of something new. She found Tsaahko at the edge of town watching the horizon. Nervous? She asked. Thoughtful, he replied. Tomorrow we speak truth to power. Some will listen, others won't. But after tomorrow, things can never go back to how they were. Is that good or bad? It's necessary. He turned to her. Whatever happens, I want you to know. Meeting you, fighting beside you, it's changed me, shown me possibilities I never imagined. You saved my life, she said. No, he corrected. We saved each other. And maybe if we're fortunate, we'll save more than just ourselves. As dawn approached on the trial day, Fort Worth was packed. The courthouse couldn't hold everyone who wanted to attend. Morrison had arranged for speakers outside to relay the proceedings to the crowd. Lila dressed carefully in a simple but dignified dress, pinning her father's watch to her collar. Tsaahko wore both traditional Comanche dress and elements of frontier clothing, visually embodying the bridge between worlds. Ready? Marshal Crawford asked as they prepared to enter. We've been ready since the day we met, Lila replied, taking Tsaahko's offered arm. They walked into the courthouse together, into history, into a future that would be written by truth rather than lies. Behind them came their allies, Comanche and settler, Mexican and Anglo, all united in demanding justice. The crowd parted before them, some with respect, others with suspicion, but all with recognition that something fundamental was changing. As they took their seats, Lila saw Rooke at the defendant's table, his confident facade cracked but not broken. He still believed his connections would save him. The judge, brought in from Austin to ensure impartiality, called for order. This trial will determine not just the guilt or innocence of one man, but perhaps the future relationship between all peoples of this territory. I expect dignity and truth from all who speak. As the prosecutor began laying out the evidence, Lila felt Tsaahko's hand briefly touch hers, a silent reminder that they were in this together. Whatever came next, they would face it, as they had everything else, united, determined, and unafraid. The truth was about to have its day, and nothing would ever be the same. The prosecutor's opening statement cut through the courtroom like a blade. Ladies and gentlemen, what you'll hear today isn't just about one man's crimes, but about a systematic attempt to ignite war for profit. He held up the ledger, its leather binding worn from their desperate flight. This evidence will show that Judge Rooke orchestrated attacks on both settlers and Comanche, murdered innocent people, and conspired to steal lands through manufactured conflict. Rooke's lawyer, Marcus Thornton from Dallas, stood immediately. Objection. These are inflammatory accusations based on documents of questionable origin. The origin of these documents will be established through testimony. The judge ruled. Proceed. Lila was called first to testify. As she walked to the witness stand, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, some sympathetic, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. She placed her hand on the Bible, her father's watch, catching the light at her collar. Miss Hart, the prosecutor began, please tell the court how you came to possess these documents. She took a breath, steadying herself. I was in my bakery when the attack on Ash Mesa began. What everyone thought was a Comanche raid was actually objection, Thornton interrupted. The witness is speculating about the nature of the attack. I'm stating what I discovered through evidence, Lila replied firmly, looking directly at the jury. Military ammunition boxes at the scene, men in formation who weren't townspeople, and this. She pulled out a brass button from her pocket, a U.S. cavalry button found where the raiders gathered, but there were no cavalry units within 50 miles that day. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge called for order. Continue, Miss Hart. She described her rescue by Tsaahko, watching several jury members' faces harden with prejudice. He didn't kidnap me. He saved me from the real threat, and he showed me evidence that my father had been investigating Judge Rooke's conspiracy before his suspicious death. Your father died of natural causes, Thornton interjected. My father died 2 weeks after refusing to sell his land to Judge Rooke. A healthy man who could lift 100-pound grain sacks suddenly has heart failure. Her voice cracked with emotion. And then I find payment records in Rooke's own hand for his elimination. She pulled out the specific page, reading aloud the damning entry. Several people in the gallery gasped. Mrs. Henderson was crying quietly. How did you obtain these documents from Judge Rooke's office? The prosecutor asked. Through the mine tunnels my father helped build. He created those passages for maintenance, but I believe he suspected they might one day be needed for another purpose. So you admit to breaking and entering? Thornton pounced. I admit to retrieving evidence of murder and conspiracy that would have been destroyed otherwise. By collaborating with a savage who— Objection, the prosecutor cut in. Counsel is using inflammatory language. Sustained. Mr. Thornton, you will refer to all parties respectfully in my courtroom. Thornton's face flushed, but he continued. You were alone with this Comanche warrior for days. Isn't it possible he influenced your thinking, perhaps threatened you? The only threats I received were from men claiming to rescue me, Lila replied. Tsaahko protected me without asking anything in return. He showed me evidence, not propaganda, and he risked his life to ensure this truth reached the court. A convenient story, Thornton said dismissively. Tell me, Miss Hart, what's your relationship with this man now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lila lifted her chin. He's my ally in seeking justice, my friend, and someone who's shown more honor than most so-called civilized men I've known. More murmurs, some shocked, others approving. She saw Tsaahko's small nod of support from his seat. Let's discuss these documents more specifically, the prosecutor redirected. Can you identify Judge Rooke's handwriting? Yes, I've seen it on numerous town documents, property deeds, official correspondence. She pointed to specific entries. This is definitely his hand. The way he loops his G's, the slant of his writing, it's unmistakable. For the next hour, she walked through the evidence methodically, each revelation building upon the last. Payment records to fake raiders, correspondence with Senator Carr about land schemes, plans to eliminate obstacles, meaning anyone who wouldn't sell. The jury leaned forward, absorbed. Then Thornton made his crucial mistake. Miss Hart, you seem very composed for someone who claims to have discovered her father was murdered, almost as if this story was rehearsed. Lila's composure finally cracked, but not in the way he expected. Her voice rose with genuine fury. Rehearsed? You think I practiced learning my father was murdered? That I rehearsed discovering the man who pretended to comfort me at his funeral was his killer? Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained strong. I've had days to live with this truth, sir. Days of rage and grief and determination that his death won't be meaningless. If that seems rehearsed to you, then you've never lost someone you loved to another's greed. The courtroom was silent. Even Thornton seemed taken aback by her raw emotion. The judge offered her a handkerchief, which she accepted gratefully. Do you need a moment, Miss Hart? The judge asked kindly. No, Your Honor. The truth has waited long enough. When Tsaahko was called to testify, the atmosphere shifted palpably. He walked to the stand with quiet dignity, his traditional dress making a statement without words. Several people in the gallery stood to leave, but Marshal Crawford's deputies blocked the doors. "Everyone will hear this testimony," the marshal announced. "Justice requires it." The prosecutor approached carefully. "Please state your name for the record." "Tsaahko, son of Running Deer Warrior of the Comanche Nation. You speak excellent English. 3 years at the reservation school, though they tried to beat it into me rather than teach it." Some uncomfortable shifting in the jury box. The prosecutor continued. "Tell us about the night you encountered Miss Hart." Tsaahko's testimony was precise, factual, delivered in a calm tone that contrasted with what people expected. He described tracking the false raiders, finding military equipment, discovering the surveyor's journal that revealed the broader conspiracy. "Why did you save Miss Hart specifically, Dom?" the prosecutor asked. "Because she was innocent and in danger. Because her father had tried to warn my people about Rooke's plans. And because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'd observed her showing kindness to my aunt when others showed only cruelty. Character reveals itself in small moments." "You're asking this court to believe that a Comanche warrior acted from pure altruism?" Thornton challenged during cross-examination. "I'm telling this court that honor exists in all peoples, just as dishonor does. Judge Rooke proved that when he led the raid that killed my mother while wearing a cavalry uniform. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact." Tsaahko pulled out a small object from his pouch. "This ring was torn from the hand of the man who shot her. It bears the inscription E.R. Willow Creek Victory, Judge Rooke's own commemorative ring." Rooke jumped to his feet. "That's a lie. That could be anyone's ring." "Then you won't mind showing the court your matching ring," the prosecutor suggested. "The one you're known to wear constantly." Rooke's hand went instinctively to his right hand, where a pale band of skin showed a ring's recent absence. The gesture wasn't lost on the jury. "Sit down, Judge Rooke," the judge commanded. "You'll have your chance to testify." As witnesses continued throughout the day, a pattern emerged. Mrs. Henderson testified about her husband's death after refusing to sell. Tom Martinez described his brother's framing and execution. Miguel from the trading post told of the bandit attacks following his refusal to sell. Each story connected to entries in Rooke's ledger, building an undeniable web of evidence. Then came the twist no one expected. Senator Carr himself entered the courtroom, but not as Thornton's witness. "Your Honor," he announced, "I wish to testify for the prosecution in exchange for immunity." The courtroom erupted. Thornton was on his feet, objecting vehemently, but the judge called for order. After a brief recess for legal discussions, Carr took the stand. "Senator, why have you chosen to testify?" the prosecutor asked. Carr looked older, defeated. "Because I've seen where this path leads. My involvement started small, just facilitating some land deals. But it escalated to murder, to trying to start a war. I can't be part of that anymore." His testimony was damning. He confirmed the conspiracy, admitted to receiving payments, and most crucially revealed that Rooke wasn't working alone. There was a network of officials throughout the territory, all profiting from conflict. "Who else is involved?" the prosecutor pressed. Carr named names: a colonel at Fort Richardson who supplied weapons to both sides, a federal judge who ensured favorable rulings, railroad executives who needed cleared land for expansion. Each name sent shockwaves through the gallery. "You realize you're implicating yourself in these crimes?" the judge asked. "I'm already implicated, Your Honor. At least now I can help stop it." During recess, Lila found herself face to face with Rooke in the hallway, deputies between them. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "You have no idea what you've started. These men have power you can't imagine. They'll destroy you." "Like you destroyed my father," she shot back. "At least I'll face them with truth instead of lies." "Truth," he scoffed. "You think truth matters to men with armies and railroads at their command? You and your savage will be dead within a month." Perhaps, Tsaahko said, appearing beside her, but the truth will outlive us all, including you. When court resumed, Rooke himself took the stand, still maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. Thornton tried to paint him as a victim of conspiracy, a scapegoat for larger forces. These documents could have been forged, Thornton argued. The handwriting similarity proves nothing without expert verification. Then let's verify it, the prosecutor said. He'd been waiting for this. I call Harold Morrison, handwriting expert from the Texas Rangers. Morrison, no relation to the newspaper man, had arrived that morning. His analysis was methodical and devastating. Using samples of Rooke's known writing from official documents, he confirmed that the ledger entries were unmistakably Rooke's. Furthermore, Morrison added, the ink, aging, and paperware indicate these were written over a period of years, not recently forged. This is authentic. The final blow came from an unexpected source. A young cavalry lieutenant entered asking to address the court. Your Honor, I've ridden 3 days from Fort Richardson. Colonel Hayes sent me to deliver this. He produced a sealed envelope. He said if Rooke was exposed, this should be read publicly. The judge opened it carefully, read it, then had the prosecutor read it aloud. It was Hayes's full confession, including details of weapon shipments, planned attacks, and most shockingly, orders from even higher up the chain of command. This goes to Washington, someone whispered in the gallery. The judge called for order. This evidence suggests a conspiracy that extends far beyond this courtroom's jurisdiction. I'm ordering copies of all evidence be sent to federal prosecutors immediately. As the day wore on toward evening, closing arguments began. Thornton did his best arguing about tainted evidence and unreliable witnesses, but his heart wasn't in it. The truth had become undeniable. The prosecutor's closing was passionate but focused. This isn't just about one man's crimes. It's about choosing what kind of society we want to be, one built on lies, theft, and murder, or one where truth matters, where justice applies equally to all. He paused, looking at each jury member. Miss Hart and Tsaahko risked everything to bring you this truth. They crossed the boundaries of race and culture because justice demanded it. Now justice demands your verdict. The jury retired to deliberate as dusk fell. The crowd outside had grown to thousands, Comanche and settlers mingling in unprecedented ways. Lila stood on the courthouse steps, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd unleashed. Whatever happens, Tsaahko said beside her, we changed things. It can't go back to how it was. Are you ready for what comes next? She asked. Are you? He countered. Your life in Ash Mesa, if you return, it won't be simple. Nothing about my life has been simple since you pulled me onto that horse, she said with a small smile. I don't think I'd want simple anymore. The jury returned after just 2 hours. As they filed in, Lila noticed several had been crying. The foreman stood, his voice clear and strong. We find the defendant Ezra Rooke guilty on all charges. The courtroom exploded. Some cheered, others shouted in protest. Rooke lunged toward Lila and Tsaahko, but was restrained by deputies. As they dragged him away, he screamed threats and curses that confirmed his guilt more than any testimony could. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. Samuel Morrison was already printing a special edition. The crowd began to disperse, but something remarkable happened. Comanche warriors and settlers began talking, sharing stories, finding common ground in their mutual suffering under Rooke's schemes. It's not over, Marshal Crawford warned Lila and Tsaahko privately. The men named in Hayes's letter, they won't accept this quietly. Then we'll face them too, Lila said firmly. We've come too far to stop now. That night there was a gathering at the edge of town. Comanche and settlers together, not celebrating but acknowledging what had been accomplished. Tsaahko's grandmother spoke her words translated for those who didn't understand. Today, two peoples who were set against each other by lies chose truth instead. This is how peace begins, not with treaties written by distant men, but with courage shown by those willing to see past hatred. As the fire burned low, Lila found herself walking with Tsaahko toward the hill overlooking Fort Worth. The lights of the city spread below them, but above the stars remained constant. "Your grandmother asked me earlier what I plan to do now," she said. "What did you tell her? That I need to return to Ash Mesa, help rebuild. But also," she hesitated, "but also, I want to help build something new. A place where your people and mine can trade, learn from each other, where children grow up knowing the truth instead of lies." "That's a large dream," Tsaahko said softly. "It would take years, maybe generations." "Then we'd better start soon," she replied, surprising herself with her certainty. He turned to face her fully. "You know there will be those on both sides who oppose this, who see our friendship as betrayal. Let them," she said firmly. "We've already been called worse and survived it." "Lila," he began, then stopped, struggling with words. "In my culture, when a warrior finds someone who matches their spirit, who fights beside them with equal courage." "Yes." Her heart was pounding. "There are ceremonies, traditions, but first, there must be acceptance from both peoples. That could take time." "I've learned patience," he said, with a slight smile. "Have you?" Before she could answer, Kato appeared, urgency in his movement. Riders approaching, many of them armed. They rushed back to town to find a small army of men not in uniform, but clearly military trained. At their head rode a man Lila recognized from newspaper sketches, General Patterson, one of the names in Hayes's confession. "Marshal Crawford," the general called out. "I'm here to restore order." "Order's already restored," Crawford replied evenly. "Justice has been served. A kangaroo court stirred up by savages and hysterical women? I think not." Patterson's men spread out hands on weapons. "All evidence in the Rooke case is now under military jurisdiction." "You have no authority," Crawford began. "I have 500 men who say otherwise." Patterson's eyes found Lila and Tsaahko. "Those two are under arrest for sedition and inciting rebellion. You can't—" Morrison started forward, but soldiers blocked him. "Watch me," Patterson said coldly. But then something extraordinary happened. The crowd that had been dispersing began returning. Word spread quickly through the Comanche camps and settler wagons. Within minutes, Patterson's 500 faced nearly 2,000 citizens, armed with everything from rifles to farming tools. "You want them, you go through us," Tom Martinez declared, standing directly in front of Lila and Tsaahko. "All of us," Mrs. Henderson added, her elderly frame straight with determination. Patterson's hand went to his sword, but Crawford stepped forward. "General, you're outnumbered and outside your jurisdiction. Moreover," he pulled out a telegram, "the Attorney General's office is very interested in why your name appears in Colonel Hayes's confession. They're sending investigators." Patterson's face went white. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he signaled his men to withdraw. As they rode away, the crowd erupted in celebration. "We did it," someone shouted. "We stood together." In that moment, Lila saw the future possibilities. It wouldn't be easy, there would be setbacks and struggles, but something fundamental had shifted. The lies that had divided them were exposed, and in their place, tentative trust was growing. "Now it begins," Tsaahko's grandmother said, appearing beside them, "the real work of building peace." As dawn broke over Fort Worth, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Lila stood with Tsaahko, and their unlikely alliance of former enemies turned allies. The trial was over, but their story was just beginning. In the distance, she could see riders heading back to Ash Mesa. It was time to go home and start building the future they'd fought to make possible. "Ready?" Tsaahko asked, offering her his hand. She took it without hesitation. "For whatever comes next." They mounted their horses, surrounded by their mixed group of Comanche warriors and frontier settlers, and rode toward the rising sun. Behind them, Fort Worth was waking to a new reality. Ahead lay challenges no one could fully predict. but also hope that had been absent for too long. The truth had set them on a new path, and wherever it led, they would walk it together. The journey back to Ash Mesa took 3 days, but the landscape they traveled through had changed. Word of the trial's outcome had spread faster than their horses could carry them. At every water stop, every trading post, people emerged to stare at the unlikely group of Comanche and settlers riding together, some with hope, others with suspicion, but all with the recognition that something unprecedented was happening. On the second night, they made camp near Willow Creek, the very place where Tsaahko's mother had died. He stood at the creek's edge as the sun set, his silhouette rigid with memory. Lila approached carefully, understanding the weight of this place. "We don't have to camp here," she offered quietly. "We could move on." "No," he said, his voice rough. "This place has held only death in my heart for too long. Perhaps it's time to let it hold something else." She stood beside him in silence, watching the water flow. Then unexpectedly, other Comanche warriors joined them. One by one, they began to speak names. Their mothers, fathers, brothers who had died in raids, both real and fabricated. The settlers, overhearing, began to approach. Mrs. Henderson spoke her husband's name. Tom Martinez named his brother. Soon the creek bank was lined with people naming their dead, all victims of Rooke's manufactured war. "They all died for a lie," Cato said bitterly. "Then let them be the last," Tsaahko replied, his voice carrying across the gathering. "Let this place where blood was spilled become where peace was born." Old Samuel, a settler who'd lost 2 sons, stepped forward with a bottle of whiskey. He poured it into the creek, then handed the bottle to a Comanche warrior. "For the dead," he said simply. The warrior took it, poured his own measure, and passed it on. The bottle made its way through the crowd, each person adding to the impromptu ceremony. That night, around the campfire, stories were shared, not of raids and revenge, but of the people lost, humanizing those who'd been reduced to statistics in Rooke's ledger. Lila watched Tsaahko translate between languages, building bridges with words as they'd built them with actions. "Your man has a gift," Mrs. Henderson said, settling beside Lila with surprising agility for her age. "He's not my—" Lila began, then stopped. What was he exactly? Ally friend? Something more that neither had dared name. "Child, I've lived long enough to know when 2 people are dancing around the obvious," Mrs. Henderson said kindly. "The question is, are you brave enough to face what comes next?" This trial was just the beginning. Before Lila could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of camp. Riders approaching fast. Everyone reached for weapons, but Tsaahko held up his hand, recognizing the lead rider. It was his cousin, but his face carried terrible news. "The army," he gasped, dismounting in haste. "They've taken the reservation. General Patterson claims it's to prevent uprising. They're holding everyone, demanding you return to face charges." "What charges?" Marshal Crawford demanded, stepping into the firelight. "Inciting rebellion, theft of government documents, conspiracy with hostile natives." The cousin's eyes were wild with fear. "They have my sister's children. They say if Tsaahko doesn't surrender by tomorrow sunset, they'll send everyone to the prison camps in Florida." The group erupted in angry voices. Some urged immediate attack, others cautioned patience. Tsaahko stood silent, his face carved from stone. "It's a trap," Crawford said. "Patterson knows he can't touch you legally after the trial, so he's using your people as leverage." "Of course it's a trap," Tsaahko replied. "But trap or not, I can't let them suffer for my actions." "Our actions," Lila corrected firmly, "and you're not going alone." "This isn't your fight, isn't it?" She faced him squarely. "Everything we've done has been together. That doesn't stop now." Morrison stepped forward. "If you go back, you need witnesses, documentation. Make it public enough that Patterson can't simply make you disappear." "I'll wire every newspaper from here to Washington," Samuel Morrison promised. "By dawn, the whole country will know what's happening." Plans formed quickly. They would approach the reservation openly with Crawford as federal witness, and Morrison documenting everything. But Lila noticed Tsaahko's grandmother pulling him aside, speaking urgently in Comanche. His responses were quiet, resigned. What did she say? Lila asked when he returned. That this was always coming, that peace has a price and leaders must be willing to pay it. He paused, then added softly, "She also said to tell you something, but I'm not sure how to translate it properly." "Try." "She said you have a warrior's heart in a baker's body, and that makes you more dangerous than any soldier." He smiled slightly. "She means it as a compliment." Dawn came too quickly. They rode hard toward the reservation, their group now swelled with settlers who refused to let them go alone. The sight that greeted them was chilling. The reservation was surrounded by soldiers, artillery positioned on the hills. In the center, visible from the approach, hundreds of Comanche sat in the dust under guard. Patterson emerged from a command tent, his uniform immaculate despite the dust. "Tsaahko of the Comanche, you're under arrest." "On what authority?" Crawford demanded. "Military authority in time of insurrection," Patterson replied smoothly. "These documents prove conspiracy against the United States government." He held up papers that made Lila's blood run cold. They were forgeries, but excellent ones, appearing to show Tsaahko planning attacks on settlements. "Those are fake," she declared. "We have the real documents obtained through theft and conspiracy." Patterson cut her off. "Miss Hart, you're also under arrest." "You can't arrest civilians without cause," Crawford protested. "I can and I will." Patterson smiled coldly. "Unless, of course, the savage admits his guilt and accepts punishment. Then Miss Hart and the other conspirators can go free." The trap was perfectly sprung. If Tsaahko denied the charges, Lila and the others would be arrested, the truth buried. If he accepted them, he'd hang for crimes he didn't commit. "Give me an hour," Tsaahko said quietly, "to speak with my people." 30 minutes, Patterson countered to it, and no tricks. Tsaahko walked among his people, touching hands, speaking quietly. Children clung to him, elders blessed him. Lila followed, her heart breaking as she understood what he was preparing to do. "You can't confess to lies," she whispered urgently. "I can if it saves lives," he replied. "Your life. My life isn't worth more than yours." He stopped, turning to face her fully. Around them, his people watched with knowing eyes. "Lila, what we started, the truth we revealed, it's bigger than us now. It needs to survive, to grow. You can ensure that happens. Not without you. You're stronger than you know." He touched her face gently, a gesture that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. "Promise me you'll continue what we began, the trading post, the school for both people's children, the dream of peace." "Tsaahko, promise me." Before she could answer, a new commotion arose. Riders approaching from the east, moving fast. But these weren't soldiers. They wore suits, carried briefcases, and at their head rode a man Lila recognized from newspaper illustrations. Theodore Hartwell, the federal prosecutor from Austin. "General Patterson," Hartwell called out, dismounting with surprising grace. "I have a federal injunction preventing any arrests or military action at this reservation." "On what grounds?" Patterson snarled. "On the grounds that you're named in an ongoing federal investigation." Hartwell pulled out a thick document. "Colonel Hayes has provided extensive testimony about your involvement in the conspiracy. You're relieved of command, effective immediately." Patterson's face went purple. "This is preposterous. I'm acting on orders." "From men who are also under investigation," Hartwell interrupted. "Major Collins, please arrest General Patterson." The major who stepped forward was young, uncertain but determined. "Sir, please surrender your sword." For a moment, violence seemed inevitable. Patterson's loyal troops faced off against those following the federal order. The Comanche watched, ready to scatter or fight. The tension stretched unbearably. Then Lila did something unexpected. She walked directly between the two groups, holding up Rooke's ledger. "Look at this," she shouted. "All of you look. See how you've been used." She opened it, reading names and payments. Sergeant Mills, your brother died in a raid Rooke paid for. Private Johnson, your family's farm was burned so the railroad could buy it cheap. You've all been tools in their game. Soldiers began lowering their weapons, looking at each other with growing understanding. Patterson reached for his pistol, but Crawford was faster, his gun pressed to the general's temple. "It's over," Crawford said quietly. "Surrender with dignity or don't. Your choice." Patterson surrendered, his career and conspiracy crumbling in moments. As soldiers led him away, he looked back at Lila and Tsaahko with pure hatred. "This isn't over. Men more powerful than me won't let this stand." "Then we'll face them too," Lila replied, her voice carrying clearly. "As many as it takes." With Patterson gone, the immediate crisis passed, but its aftermath revealed deeper challenges. The reservation inhabitants were freed but traumatized. Trust, fragile to begin with, had been shattered again. Many Comanche wanted to leave to find new lands away from whites entirely. Tsaahko's grandmother gathered the elders for counsel, while the settlers made camp nearby. The two groups, so recently united, seemed to be fracturing again. Lila felt despair creeping in. Had all their efforts been for nothing? Change is never smooth, Morrison said, finding her sitting alone on a boulder. "What you've accomplished, it's still remarkable. Is it? Look at them, still separate, still suspicious. But talking," he pointed out. "That's new, and look there." She followed his gesture to see children from both groups playing together near the creek, their parents watching nervously but not intervening. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. That evening, Tsaahko found her at the same boulder. "The council has decided. Half will leave, seek lands further west. Half will stay, try to build what we discussed. And you, that depends. On what? On whether you meant what you said about building something new together." She turned to face him fully. "Every word. Even knowing how hard it will be, the resistance from both sides, the danger, we've already faced worse and survived." He smiled then, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Then I stay, we stay, and we build." The work began immediately. Using Rooke's confiscated assets, they purchased land between Ash Mesa and the reservation neutral ground for a new kind of settlement. The plans were ambitious: a trading post, a school, a medical clinic, places where both peoples could interact as equals. Resistance came quickly. A group of settlers led by a man named Garrett, who'd profited from Rooke's schemes, tried to block the land purchase. "You're betraying your own kind," Garrett spat at Lila during a heated town meeting. "I'm trying to save us all from repeating past mistakes," she countered. "By mixing with savages, by letting them corrupt our children, by teaching our children truth instead of hatred," she replied firmly. "By showing them that different doesn't mean dangerous." The meeting erupted in arguments. Chairs were thrown. Someone pulled a gun, but Mrs. Henderson, of all people, knocked it from his hand with her walking stick. "Enough," she shouted with surprising authority. "We've seen where hatred leads to graves and lies and men like Rooke getting rich on our blood. If these young people want to try something different, let them." Support came from unexpected sources. The Mexican trading families, long caught between both worlds, embraced the idea enthusiastically. Some cavalry soldiers, disgusted by Patterson's corruption, volunteered to help with construction. Even some of Garrett's supporters began to waver as they saw the potential for profitable trade. The first building raised was the school. Both communities participated, though they worked in separate groups initially. Then a beam slipped, nearly crushing a Comanche child. Tom Martinez dove, pushing the child clear, but catching the beam's weight himself. Instantly, both groups rushed to help, working together to free him. "Guess a beam doesn't care what color you are when it's falling." Martinez gasped, bruised but smiling. It became a turning point. The shared danger, the instinctive cooperation reminded them of their common humanity. As autumn approached, the settlement began taking shape. The trading post opened first cautiously, with strict rules about fair dealing. The school followed with teachers from both communities and a curriculum that included both cultures' knowledge. But success brought new dangers. One night, riders attacked, burning the half-built clinic. No one was hurt, but the message was clear: not everyone wanted peace. Garrett's men, Cato reported, having tracked them. We could retaliate, some urged. No, Tsaahko said firmly. That's the old way. We use the law. They did, bringing charges with Crawford's help. The trial was smaller than Rooke's, but significant. Garrett was convicted, his followers scattered. Justice through law rather than vengeance, another precedent set. Winter brought unexpected challenges. A harsh blizzard trapped both communities, forcing closer cooperation for survival. The shared hardship broke down more barriers. Comanche knowledge of weather patterns combined with settler construction techniques to create shelters that saved lives from both groups. During the worst of the storm, Lila and Tsaahko found themselves alone in the trading post, keeping the fire alive while others slept. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Giving up your simple life for this complexity? Do you regret giving up the warrior's path for building peace? A warrior's true victory is not needing to fight, he replied, quoting his grandmother. But that doesn't answer my question. I regret nothing, she said firmly, except perhaps that it took tragedy to bring us together. Perhaps that's the only way real change happens, he suggested. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows. Outside the blizzard howled, but inside there was warmth and possibility. Your grandmother spoke to me yesterday, Lila said, about ceremonies and traditions. Oh, she said that in your culture, when two people choose to bind their lives, both communities must witness and approve. That's true. And in my culture, there are similar expectations. Also true. So what do we do when we're building a new culture entirely? Tsaahko considered this. We create new traditions, ones that honor both but are enslaved to neither. Is that what we're doing, binding our lives? He moved closer, taking her hands. Lila Hart, we've already bound our lives through danger, through purpose, through this dream we're building. The only question is whether we acknowledge it formally. Before she could respond, shouts erupted outside. They rushed out to find the storm had broken, revealing a sight that stopped them cold. Hundreds of lights approached from both directions, torches and lanterns carried by people from Ash Mesa and the reservation, all converging on their settlement. What is this? Lila breathed. Tsaahko's grandmother stepped forward from the crowd alongside Mrs. Henderson. We've been talking both councils. If you two are going to lead this new way, you need the blessing of both peoples. But not the old blessings, Mrs. Henderson added. Something new, something that shows what we're trying to become. What followed was unlike any ceremony either culture had seen before. Elements of Comanche tradition, the blessing smoke, the four directions honored. Elements of frontier Christian custom, the exchange of vows, the community witness. But also something entirely new, children from both communities singing together, hands joined in a circle that encompassed everyone present. This isn't just about you two, the grandmother said to Lila and Tsaahko. It's about all of us choosing a different path. As dawn broke, the settlement had transformed. No longer just buildings on neutral ground, but a true community. The ceremony had been about more than two people. It had been about two people choosing to try something unprecedented. Morrison was there, of course, documenting everything. This will be front-page news across the country, he promised. The marriage that might change the frontier. No pressure, Lila muttered, making Tsaahko laugh. But pressure came anyway. Letters arrived from Washington, some supportive, others threatening. Railroad executives who'd lost money in Rooke's collapse wanted revenge. Military officials who'd been implicated fought back through political channels. The biggest threat came in spring. A new federal commissioner arrived, claiming authority over all Indian affairs in the territory. Commissioner Blackwood was smooth where Rooke had been crude, using law instead of violence, but his goal was the same: force the Comanche onto ever smaller reservations and open their lands for development. "Your little experiment is admirable," he told Lila and Tsaahko during his first visit, "but ultimately doomed. The races weren't meant to mix." "According to whom?" Lila challenged. "According to nature, science, and God's plan," he replied smoothly. "Funny how God's plan always seems to benefit men like you," she shot back. His smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. "Be careful, Mrs. Hart. Your husband's people exist at the government's pleasure. That could change." After he left, they knew the real fight was just beginning. Blackwood had the law on his side, twisted though his interpretation might be. They needed allies, evidence, and most importantly, success that couldn't be denied. The school became their first battlefield. Blackwood tried to shut it down, claiming integrated education was illegal, but they'd been careful establishing it on private land with private funding. He tried other tactics: intimidation, bribes, threats to parents who sent their children. But the school survived and even thrived. The children were the key. Seeing them learn together, play together, succeed together changed hearts in ways no argument could. When little Sarah Martinez solved a complex problem using both Comanche counting methods and European mathematics, when young Kicking Bird Thompson wrote a story blending both cultures' narratives, when the mixed chorus performed at the Harvest Festival, moving grown men to tears, the settlement's purpose became undeniable. By year's end, other communities were sending delegations wanting to learn how it worked. The settlement had grown to nearly 300 people, with more arriving monthly. It wasn't without problems. Fights still broke out. Prejudices still surfaced, but there were mechanisms for dealing with them that didn't involve violence. On the anniversary of Rooke's trial, they held a celebration. Both communities gathered to remember how far they'd come. Testimonies were shared, stories of transformation. Former enemies, now partners, children who saw diversity as normal businesses, thriving through cooperation. Tsaahko stood to address the crowd, Lila beside him. "1 year ago, we were trying to kill each other based on lies. Today, we're building something that makes those lies impossible to maintain. We're not perfect, we're not finished, but we're proof that another way exists." The crowd erupted in approval, but Lila noticed movement at the edge of the gathering, riders approaching, many of them, and at their head Commissioner Blackwood with federal marshals. "I'm shutting this down," he announced. "This illegal settlement is hereby dissolved by federal order." He produced documents official-looking and severe. The crowd grew angry, some reaching for weapons, but Lila stepped forward. "On what grounds? Violation of the Indian Appropriations Act, illegal congregation, and subversion of federal authority." "You mean we're succeeding where your policies failed?" she countered. "I mean you're under arrest, all of you." But as the marshals moved forward, something unexpected happened. The children stepped between them and their parents, Comanche, and settler children, linking arms, standing firm. "You'll have to arrest us first," young Sarah Martinez declared, her voice clear and strong. The marshals hesitated. Arresting adults was one thing, but children. The image would destroy public support for Blackwood's policies. Morrison was already there with his camera, other journalists beside him. "Commissioner, are you really ordering the arrest of children?" Blackwood saw the trap. If he proceeded, the public outcry would be enormous. If he backed down, his authority was undermined. He chose a third option. 48 hours, he declared. "You have 48 hours to disperse peacefully, or I'll return with the army." As he rode away, the settlement erupted in urgent planning. Some wanted to fight, others to flee, but Lila had a different idea. "We don't disperse," she said. "We expand. In 48 hours, we make this settlement so essential to the territory's economy and peace that removing us would cause more problems than leaving us." It was audacious, maybe impossible, but it was their only chance. Messages went out to every ally, every sympathetic ear, every newspaper that would listen. The next 48 hours would determine whether their dream survived or died. The 48 hours began with desperate energy. Riders scattered in every direction carrying messages, while others worked through the night fortifying not with weapons but with witnesses. Morrison's telegraph clicked constantly, sending the story across the nation. By dawn, responses were pouring in, some expected, others miraculous. "The governor's refusing to intervene," Crawford reported grimly, reading the latest telegram. "Says it's a federal matter." "Sure, but look at this," Morrison countered, waving another message. "The New York Times is sending reporters. Harper's Weekly wants illustrations. This is becoming national news." Lila stood at the center of organized chaos, coordinating efforts, while Tsaahko marshaled their defenses. Not military defenses, but legal and social ones. Every document was copied in triplicate, every land deed verified, every testimony recorded. "We need more," Tsaahko said, finding her near exhaustion after 20 straight hours. "Legal standing isn't enough if they bring the army." "Then we need something they can't fight with guns," she replied, an idea forming. "We need their own people to stand with us." The plan was audacious. They sent messages to every military family who'd lost someone in Rooke's false raids, every soldier who'd testified at the trial, every person of conscience who'd witnessed the corruption. "Come stand with us," the message said. "Show them that Americans won't stand for injustice, even against the Comanche." The first to arrive surprised everyone. Captain Michael Harrison, the young officer who'd helped arrest Patterson, rode in with 30 soldiers who'd requested leave to attend. "We swore to protect American citizens," Harrison declared. "That includes citizens trying to build peace." Next came a delegation of Quakers from Pennsylvania, having traveled for days after hearing Morrison's reports. Then Mexican trading families from across the territory, former slaves from Texas who understood oppression, Chinese railroad workers who knew discrimination. The settlement swelled from 300 to over 1,000 in 36 hours. But the most shocking arrival came just 12 hours before the deadline. An elegant carriage pulled up and out stepped Elizabeth Blackwood, the commissioner's own daughter. "Miss Blackwood." Lila couldn't hide her amazement. "Mrs. Hart," the young woman replied, her Eastern education evident in every word. "I've come to stand with you. My father is wrong, and I won't be silent anymore." Her presence sent shockwaves through both camps, Blackwood's own daughter defying him publicly. The story wrote itself, and Morrison's pen flew across pages. "He'll disown you," Lila warned. "He disowned his conscience long ago," Elizabeth replied. "I won't follow that path." As the final hours ticked down, the settlement transformed into something unprecedented. Comanche teepees stood beside settler wagons, Mexican guitars played alongside native drums, Chinese lanterns hung next to American flags. It was chaos and beauty intertwined, a vision of what America could be rather than what it was. Commissioner Blackwood arrived exactly at the deadline with 200 soldiers, but he stopped at the settlement's edge, seeing the crowd that awaited him. Journalists from every major newspaper, representatives from churches across the nation, and at the front his own daughter standing between Lila and Tsaahko. "Elizabeth," he called out, his composure cracking. "Come away from there." "No, father, not until you see what you're trying to destroy. I'm enforcing the law." "You're enforcing prejudice," she interrupted. "Look around you. These people aren't violating anything except your narrow vision of what's possible." The standoff stretched taut. Soldiers faced civilians, guns against principles. Then young Sarah Martinez stepped forward, the same child who'd solved problems using both cultures' methods. In her hands, she carried something that made everyone pause, an American flag sewn with Comanche patterns, stars arranged in the sacred four directions, stripes interwoven with native designs. "We made this together," she said in her clear child's voice. "It's still America, just bigger." The symbolism was perfect, the image unforgettable. Several soldiers lowered their rifles, moved by the simple truth from a child's lips. Blackwood's face purpled with rage. "Captain, arrest the leaders immediately." But Captain Harrison stepped forward. "Sir, I see no violation of law here. These people are on private land, conducting peaceful assembly. I'm giving you a direct order, and I'm refusing an illegal one," Harrison replied steadily. "Sir," the rebellion spread through the ranks. Soldiers who'd seen corruption in the Indian Wars, who'd lost friends to manufactured conflicts, who'd joined to protect rather than oppress, began stepping back, lowering weapons. Blackwood pulled his own pistol, pointing it at Tsaahko. "Then I'll enforce the law myself." Everything froze. The click of hammers being cocked echoed across the settlement as dozens of people, settler and Comanche alike, aimed at Blackwood. But Tsaahko raised his hand, stopping them. "Commissioner," he said calmly, "you can shoot me, but look around. My death won't stop this. It will only water the seeds we've planted with blood, and they'll grow stronger." "Father, please," Elizabeth stepped directly between the gun and Tsaahko. "This isn't who you were. Remember when you taught me about justice, about fairness? What happened to that man?" For a moment, Blackwood's hand trembled. Then another voice cut through the tension. "Commissioner Blackwood, lower your weapon." Everyone turned to see a distinguished man in an expensive suit dismounting from a carriage. Lila recognized him from newspaper illustrations. Senator James Pemberton, chairman of the Committee on Indian Affairs. "Senator," Blackwood stammered, "this is a federal matter." "Indeed it is, which is why I'm here." Pemberton pulled out an official document. "Commissioner Blackwood, you're relieved of your position pending investigation into corruption and abuse of power." The gun fell from Blackwood's nerveless fingers. "You can't." "I can, and I have. It seems your efforts to suppress this settlement attracted the wrong kind of attention. The president himself is interested in what's happening here." As Blackwood was led away, his daughter watching with tears but determination, Senator Pemberton addressed the crowd. "I came here expecting to find chaos and lawlessness. Instead, I find Americans, all Americans, building something remarkable. This settlement will not only continue but will receive federal protection as an experimental community for peaceful integration." The crowd erupted in celebration, but Lila felt Tsaahko tense beside her. "What's wrong?" "Experimental means temporary," he said quietly. "This isn't over." He was right, of course. The senator's protection came with conditions. Regular inspections reports proof that the settlement was succeeding. They'd won a battle, not the war. Over the following months, the settlement became a destination for the curious and the hopeful. Delegations arrived from other territories wanting to replicate their model. The school expanded, adding advanced classes that drew students from hundreds of miles away. The trading post became a hub for commerce that enriched everyone involved. But success brought new challenges. A harsh drought tested their cooperation when water became scarce. Disease struck, affecting both communities equally, forcing them to work together or die separately. Each crisis either strengthened their bonds or threatened to tear them apart. The most serious test came when a group of young Comanche warriors, frustrated by the slow pace of change, planned to raid a nearby settlement that had refused to trade with them. "This will destroy everything we've built," Tsaahko told them, confronting them in council. "Your way is too slow," their leader Running Wolf argued. "They still see us as less than human." "Some do," Tsaahko agreed. "But every day fewer do. Every child who grows up here will see differently. Violence now undoes all of that." "Pretty words," Running Wolf spat. "But my cousin was shot last week for being on white land." It was true. Despite their progress, violence still occurred outside their settlement. The question was how to respond. Lila surprised everyone by speaking in the council in Comanche she'd been learning. Running Wolf is right to be angry, but anger must be channeled into change, not vengeance. Easy words from someone who haven't lost. She stood, her voice rising. "My father was murdered, my town was burned. I've lost plenty, but I chose to build rather than burn. That's the choice before you now." The council lasted all night. In the Running Wolf agreed to try legal channels first. They brought charges against the shooter and, surprisingly, with the new federal oversight, got a conviction. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was justice through law rather than blood. Elizabeth Blackwood, who'd stayed after her father's disgrace, became the settlement's legal advocate. Her education and connections proved invaluable in navigating federal bureaucracy. She also brought something unexpected, a romance with Kato that scandalized and delighted in equal measure. Another mixed couple, Morrison observed, documenting their wedding. "You're making this normal." "That's the idea," Lila replied. "Normal takes time, but it starts with examples." Their own marriage had evolved from alliance to something deeper. The child growing within her was proof of that, a symbol of the future they were building. When she told Tsaahko, his joy was tempered with concern. "This child will belong to both worlds fully, neither partially," he said, hand on her still flat belly. "Then this child will be the bridge we're trying to build," she replied. The pregnancy became settlement news, then territorial news, then national news. Letters poured in, some congratulating, others condemning. But most importantly, both communities rallied around them, seeing the child as theirs collectively. The birth came during a blizzard naturally. Both the Comanche medicine woman and Doc Morrison attended, combining their knowledge. The labor was difficult, dangerous, with moments where they thought they'd lose both mother and child. "Don't you dare leave me now," Tsaahko whispered, holding her hand as she struggled. "We have too much work left to do." "Not going anywhere," she gasped between contractions. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and loud, the storm broke. Sun streamed through the windows as if in blessing. They named him Samuel Standing Bear, honoring both traditions. "He's perfect," Elizabeth cooed, holding the baby, while Kato looked on with wonder. "He's hope," Tsaahko's grandmother corrected. "Living hope that two peoples can become one." The child's existence changed dynamics throughout the territory. It was harder to preach separation when a living example of unity was thriving. Other mixed families, previously hidden or shamed, began emerging, finding acceptance in the settlement. By the second anniversary of Rooke's trial, the settlement had grown into a proper town. They named it Harmony, despite Lila arguing it was too optimistic. "Optimism built this place," Tsaahko countered. "Let's honor that." The federal inspection that year was crucial. If they passed, they'd receive permanent status and funding. If they failed, Blackwood's allies would shut them down. Senator Pemberton arrived with a delegation of officials, some supportive, others skeptical. They spent 3 days examining everything: the school where children of all backgrounds learned together, the court where disputes were settled by mixed juries, the businesses where profit was shared fairly, the clinic where healing traditions merged. "This is impressive," Pemberton admitted, "but can it last? What happens when the current generation passes?" Young Sarah Martinez, now 14 and eloquent beyond her years, asked to address the delegation. "Senator, you ask about the future. We are the future. We've grown up seeing cooperation as normal, diversity as strength. We don't have to overcome prejudice because we were never taught it. This isn't an experiment to us, it's home." Her words were echoed by other young people, Comanche and settler, Mexican and Chinese. They spoke of friendships that crossed all lines, of dreams that included everyone, of a future where harmony wasn't exceptional but expected. The delegation voted unanimously to grant permanent status. More importantly, they recommended Harmony as a model for other territories. The dream was spreading, but the biggest surprise came from Washington. A letter arrived sealed with the presidential stamp. Lila read it aloud to the gathered crowd. "In recognition of extraordinary service to the cause of peace and unity, the President grants full pardons for any past actions taken in pursuit of justice, and furthermore appoints Lila Hart and Tsaahko as special advisors on territorial integration." The crowd erupted, but Lila and Tsaahko exchanged concerned looks. With recognition came responsibility and danger. there were still plenty who opposed everything harmony represented. That danger manifested weeks later. A group calling itself the Pure Territory Alliance attacked at dawn trying to burn the school, but they hadn't counted on the community's vigilance or unity. Comanche warriors and settler farmers fought side by side, protecting what they'd built together. The attackers were captured, but their leader shocked everyone. It was Garrett, supposedly in prison, freed by allies and bent on revenge. "You think you've won?" he snarled at Lila. "You've destroyed the natural order. This mongrel town is an abomination." "This mongrel town is the future," she replied calmly, "and you're the past fighting a battle already lost." His trial was swift, his conviction certain, but his words haunted Lila. How many more Garretts were out there? How many would try to destroy what they'd built? "As many as it takes," Tsaahko said when she voiced her fears. "But look around. For every Garrett there are dozens who choose hope over hate." He was right. Letters arrived daily from communities wanting to establish their own harmonies. Young couples mixed like them or simply inspired by them came seeking a place where love mattered more than lineage. The third anniversary celebration was the largest yet. Thousands attended, including delegations from Washington tribal nations and foreign observers curious about this American experiment. Morrison, now permanently residing in Harmony, had published a book about their journey that was selling nationwide. "You've changed everything," he told Lila and Tsaahko. "This story, your story, it's reshaping how America sees itself." "We just wanted to survive," Lila replied, "to find truth and justice. And in doing so, you showed a nation what's possible." As sunset approached, the celebration culminated in a ceremony at Willow Creek, where so much blood had been spilled. The water ran clear now, children playing in its shallows, without knowledge of its dark history. Tsaahko's grandmother, ancient now, but still strong, performed a blessing. Not Comanche alone, not Christian alone, but something new, something evolved. She spoke of water washing clean of seeds planted in sorrow, bearing fruit in joy of children who would never know the hatred their parents overcame. "Time is a river," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered thousands. "It can erode or it can build. These two," she gestured to Lila and Tsaahko, "chose to build. Now we all choose. Every day we choose." As night fell, lanterns were lit and set afloat on the creek, each one carrying a wish for the future. Samuel, standing bare, now walking on sturdy legs, totted between his parents, reaching for the lights reflected in the water. "Papa, pretty," he exclaimed. In the mixed language he was learning, Comanche and English blended naturally. "Yes," Tsaahko agreed, lifting his son. "Very pretty." Lila watched her husband and child, then looked out at the crowd, all these people who'd risked everything for a dream of unity. It hadn't been easy. People had died, sacrifices had been made, and challenges remained. But here, in this moment, with lanterns floating like stars on water, she saw the future they'd fought for becoming real. "Do you remember," she asked Tsaahko, "that night in the cave when you said we were trying to change the world? I remember you saying we were insane to try." "We were," she laughed, "but look what insanity built." Commissioner Blackwood had been wrong. The races weren't meant to be separate. They were meant to learn from each other, grow together, become something greater than the sum of their parts. Harmony was proof of that. As the celebration continued around them, a rider approached with urgent news. Another settlement had been attacked, its mixed families driven out. The fight wasn't over. It might never be truly over, but now they weren't fighting alone. "We go help them," Tsaahko said immediately. All of us, Sarah Martinez added, now a leader among the youth. Together, Elizabeth and Kato agreed. This was their legacy, not just one town, but a movement. Not just one couple, but hundreds, finding courage in their example. Not just survival, but transformation. Morrison was already preparing his horse notebook ready. "This story isn't ending," he said. "It's just beginning." "Then we'd better make it a good one," Lila replied, her hand finding Tsaahko's. They rode out at dawn, 300 strong, heading toward the attacked settlement. Behind them, harmony stood as proof that peace was possible. Ahead lay challenges, struggles, probably more violence from those who feared change. But they rode forward anyway, because that's what warriors for peace do. They face the darkness and carry light into it. As they crested the hill, the rising sun painted the landscape gold, and Lila heard her father's voice on the wind, or perhaps it was just memory. Build bridges, not walls. They'd built the bridge. Now they'd spend their lives helping others cross it. "Ready?" Tsaahko asked, just as he had that morning in Fort Worth when they'd walked into the courthouse together. "For whatever comes next," she replied the same answer, but now weighted with years of proof that together they could face anything. Their son rode with his grandmother, already learning the songs of both peoples. Behind them rode the future, mixed families, former enemies, now friends, children who saw diversity as natural as breathing. They'd started with one woman's desperate flight and one warrior's choice to save rather than harm. They'd built something that would outlive them all. The settlement they were riding to save was called Hope Springs. Fitting, Lila thought. Hope did spring even from the darkest ground when people chose to plant it together. As they rode toward another fight for justice, she felt not exhaustion but exhilaration. This was their life's work, not the building of one town but the transformation of a nation, one heart, one mind, one settlement at a time. The story that had begun with "Don't touch me" had become "Stand with me." The warrior who'd lit her heart on fire had helped her forge that flame into a beacon for others. Together they'd proven that love could conquer hate, that truth could defeat lies, that people divided by fear could unite through courage. As the rescue party thundered across the prairie, Lila smiled. Let others write the ending of their story. They were too busy living it, creating a legacy of hope in a land that had known too much despair. The Comanche warrior and the baker's daughter, unlikely allies, become partners, become symbols of what America could be when it chose love over fear. The sun climbed higher, blessing their passage, and somewhere in the distance an eagle cried the sound of change on the wind, unstoppable now, spreading across the territory like wildfire. But instead of destroying it, was illuminating, showing a nation what was possible when people chose to see each other as human. Nothing more, nothing less, everything. Their story would be told for generations, growing in the telling, but the truth at its heart would remain. Two people from different worlds chose to build a bridge, and in doing so, showed a divided nation how to heal. It had started with suspicion and ended with hope. It had begun with separation and concluded with unity. Most importantly, it had transformed impossible into inevitable. The Comanche warrior had indeed lit her heart on fire, but together they'd used that flame to forge a future where their son and all children could grow up free from the prejudices that had nearly destroyed them all. This was their victory, their legacy, their love story, not just for each other, but for the possibility of a better world. As harmony disappeared behind them and Hope Springs appeared ahead, Lila and Tsaahko rode side by side, ready for whatever came next, knowing that whatever battles lay ahead, they'd already won the war that mattered most, the one for people's hearts and minds. The rest was just details.